Awesome. Awesome. I'm happy that you're here, Ashish. I'm curious to hear your story. I'm curious to hear how you came up with all the ideas, what took you, yeah, what brought you through that journey and to the situation where we are here today. And maybe you can give us a short intro in who you are, what you guys doing, and then we go back in time.
Absolutely. Well, again, first, thank you for having me on your podcast. I am Ashish Kapoor, CEO of General Robotics. General Robotics is a startup that's aiming to deploy general purpose robotics, general purpose AI onto robots rapidly. One of the things that we have realized is that my background is researcher. I spent 17 years at Microsoft Research and did a number of things from quantum machine learning to, of course, my PhD was in machine learning and robotics and human computation, all kinds of things you can think about. And very little of those technologies ended up in the real world deployment.
Mm.
Last 10 years of my work at Microsoft Research was on robotics, and I didn't want that with it, right? I wanted to see that technology being used widely because I understand, I realize the power, right? Quick background, my journey started in engineering, from very young. My parents were scientists. They were both forensic scientists. So science and math was always in the household. That was the focus of our lives. Of course, they were not engineers, but thankfully, I had friends who were interested into engineering, and one of the biggest lessons that I learned is that you become who you hang out with, right? And I've been blessed to have friends and colleagues who are some of the top world-class engineers and scientists in the world, and I aspire to be with them. So at growing up very young, science and math, all those conversations around me, but you know, I was a tinkerer as well. Not a very good one, I would say, but I tried my hand at it. Right? I broke many things, of course, like a lot of you know young boys and girls who aspire to build things, just to see take things apart and put them back together, trying to repair things. Um, and I think that's where the seed for robotics got planted.
And sorry, you said that so these kind of conversations were around you, and I like the idea, as you said, you're becoming more or less, what the people around you inspire you, and you exchange conversations. So, and you said your parents, even though not being engineers themselves, being scientists. So, do you think this sparked this kind of curiosity necessary to dig into those fields deeper? Because not it's not for everyone, right? Math and
Yeah.
physics is a lot of people trying to stay away from them as much as they can, and but it was not like that for you.
Yeah, yeah, it was not like that. I mean, it was, you know, it was very natural. I had a hardest time in the artistic endeavors, let me put it that way. And but science and math came very naturally. And I could only say that because, probably when I was very young, some of those seeds were sown, and you never realize these things. So, so yes, to answer your question, it might not be natural for many, but for me, I think it was just the household that I grew up in. Experimentation was always encouraged. I mean, the youngest memory I have is around, I would say, tinkering with something with my dad, right? Maybe it was a science experiment, maybe it was just opening up his scooter and cleaning it and having me you know, help him. So things like those. Like, but one thing also is a fact that the role of friends and peers is a, is a big factor. I mean, if you have friends who are interested in, say, tennis, very likely you'll get interested in tennis. If you have friends who are interested in engineering, you'll likely, hang out with them and you learn from them. And I have a couple. I have two boys, 10 and 12, and I see that kind of things happening with them as well. You know, you don't want to listen to your parents, but you want to listen to your peer group. You seek validation and approval from them, and I think it's a very natural human trait. So that's one thing that I really, I would say, aspire for as we are building the company as well, that we have some of the best people, full of drive, curiosity, and integrity to come and work, so that all of that permeates through the organization, right? Because I've seen the story repeat on and on and on, not just while growing up in high school, but in college, in PhD, and even in the work as well. So that peer group is probably one of the most important factors, according to me. I think that has led me to where I am.
It's interesting that you say this because just the other day I had a conversation with someone who would argue that it's very much depends on the person, and I said, and it's not necessarily the Eddie Murphy film from the 80s, where you put the same person in a different environment and they start acting differently, right? This is a movie, but I also
Right.
very much believe what you said in terms of it's very much and cannot be overrated the influence that other people, parents obviously, but at a certain age you're not spending so much time with parents anymore. You spend more time with your peers, as you said. It cannot be overrated, right? It's totally different if you spend the time with the right people, whatever that means.
Absolutely. I spent 2 decades in academia, and you can see the patterns of thinking that emerge from various academic groups. Like even in robotics, you know that there is a UPenn way of thinking, there is a CMU way of thinking, there is a Stanford way of thinking, there is the European way of thinking, right? So you can see the patterns of even the highly sophisticated academic work that some of these groups would put out. And often I would talk to a researcher and I could sort of sense a pattern already, looks like that's very much their their journey has been. And these are some of the most well accomplished, and I would say independent thinkers, right? And you see this pattern emerge. So I truly believe that who you surround with determines your fate pretty much, in terms of what you'll pursue, how you think about it, how you act on it, and also how would you influence the world with all the work that you have done, right? So it's very interesting. And an anecdote I'll tell you about. So again, my background, I did my I was born in India. I spent first 20 years of my life in India, did my undergrad. I was lucky to be at Indian Institute of Technology, one of the premier institutes in engineering, right? And ended up getting accepted to into a PhD program. When I left India, I had never heard of machine learning. We had a small dinky course in AI, but this is year 96 to 2000. Theoretical computer science, that's what everyone was doing. You were analyzing algorithms and data structures. Again, this is India, so if you had a pen and a paper, all you needed, and with your brain power, you could make yourself pretty useful and be very accomplished, right? So I never heard of machine learning at all. Day one, I end up at MIT, and everyone's talking machine learning. And I'm like, what the hell is this machine learning, right? And sure enough, I ended up taking a class, and rest is history, right? It's the fact that I was completely oblivious about an area that was so big. So this is again 25 years ago, right? There were very few places where people were actively working and having so much excitement about an area. But that's another proof point, right? Can I claim to be self-made man? Not really. You know, I was put in the right circumstances, and of course, my mind was open. I was willing to learn about it, even though I didn't know what machine learning was. I gave it a chance, right? So that's another example. Like, and there are countless, many examples where things that I wasn't aware of was made aware because of the community around me, and it's been a very important factor.
Thanks that you're sharing this, and I'm very much impressed by the fact that you're being so reflective about this, like being able to understand that this is something like because people are tend to be, especially when they go through hard times, and being able to deliver for not only for one exam but for a very long period of time. As you said, you went into one of the best engineering schools. It's not easy to get in there, right, in the first place.
Yep, yep,
So it's
yep.
and then it's not easy to leave India for MIT either, right? It's not something that somebody's just you can just buy or depends, but it's not easy as to apply and to get into, and but sitting there having all that accomplished and still saying something like I'm not a self-made man. I think you have my highest respect for being able to being this kind of humble and also reality or reflecting reality, right? Because it doesn't take away any ounce of you spending hours and hours in the university library and doing your homework and doing your studies but it still puts things into perspective that sometimes you do need to be at the right time at the right place.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And by again, by surrounding yourself with some of the brilliant minds, that's what you maximize. You maximize access to some of these ideas that otherwise, I mean, there is a small chance, definitely, that you might do it on your own. But of course, you maximize your potential by being open and being exposed to all of these different minds, right? I think there used to be I don't know if how popular it is, but Hamming, from the Hamming code, he had a tech report going around on the internet. This is back 20 years ago. I read it while I was doing my PhD about how to do good research, right? And I don't know if you ever read about that paper, right? I'm sure I can dig it and send the link to you. But this is the day and age of Bell Labs, and again, the one of the core pieces that stuck with me was that, right, be prepared, be ready. You have to be skillful. There's no question about it. But immerse yourself with some of the brightest mind and these ideas. And a lot of science in the past have been serendipity, right? From the time of the benzene ring anecdote, where where the structure of benzene was kind of discovered in sleep, to a host of beautiful full accidents and incidents. So being open and being ready with your skills is what I think is has has the chance of most success.
You were so kind to give us already some outview in what's happening. You leaving India and pursuing a PhD at MIT. But if you don't mind me to stay 2 more seconds
Yeah,
in India, getting into that kind of school is hard, especially as
it's
it's very
hard.
competitive, and there's a lot of potential things that you can do if you accomplish that, right? And you said your parents were scientists, but was there an incentive that came from within, or was that pressure that was put, or was it mix of both? How did you think it was a good
Yeah,
idea to go to that university?
yeah. I mean, pressure was always there. I mean, I joke everyone that I maybe peaked during when I was writing for that exam. I remember spending, again, no shame in it, but for a couple of years, I was probably studying close to 16 hours a day, right? And the kind of knowledge that I had in my head at that time, I mean, I am amazed that I could do that, right? The entire books, thick books of organic chemistry, I had like memorized. The kind of problems that I would solve in physics and mathematics. I mean, no computers or no calculators allowed then, right? So it was intense. It was intense, and I do not think that it's something to be proud of that we cracked this exam, but it was the necessity, right? The acceptance rates are less than 1%, right? And if you want to study computer science or any of these fields, you have to be within the top 100 ranked across nationwide, right? And there were no options, right? This is 25 years ago. There were only handful of engineering schools. It was not like now where there are many private options. Then there were only 4 or 5 institutes across the country. You had to be really dedicated and be good at it. Just dedication. There were several people who were dedicated and they'll spend years and years, right? So yes, the pressure was immense, right? And there was a sense of accomplishment, right? There was a sense of accomplishment once we went through the whole thing. But I joke that I peaked during those years, and after that, everything is downhill. Just because the effort that the energy that required to pass those exams were so it required so much. On the flip side, is I tell this to everyone coming from India. Usually, the Indian education system, specifically the kind of competition that I'm talking about, it makes you really good problem solver, right? You give me a hard piece of puzzle, a mathematical equation on physics, we can probably solve it. But what it does not make you is someone who can figure out what are the good problems to solve. And in the long scheme of things, what matters is understanding what are the important problems to solve, right? And that makes it the difference between a decision maker and a skilled laborer, really, right? So it's very important for many of these, young folks who might be listening to the podcast to understand that, of course, you need the skill, but you also need that outlook, that mental maturity to understand what's important and what's not, right? So that you can really make a difference.
I like that you say this because I talk to a lot of founders. I work together with a lot of startup founders, robotic AI, pre-seed, seed, Series A, and some of them raised already 20 million, 50 million, 120 million. And then you see that the problems remain the same. Why is that? The reason is people are focusing on the wrong things. So you might be able to firefight pretty good. You're a good firefighter because there's PoCs that you do, pilot projects that you do, early customers that you do, and you're trying to finish and like getting rid of all those fires, right? But the question is, are you spending 20, 30% on product development that is due in 6 months' time, 8, 12, 16 months' time, right? Are you fighting for your life not only to preserve those fires or to get off those fires, but to understand the product needs to develop for the next stage, for a customer that is not there yet, right? And are you able to say no? So are you able to make the decision and the prioritization because you have limited resources to tell your team to focus on one thing and burn a customer and lead burn a customer and maybe leave some money on the side on the street, not being able to catch it, right? Because you're so
Yeah.
desperate getting your early users, getting your early customers and clients. You're trying to do everything and anything. But the question is what you said, and I'm very thankful that you said it, because it's the same with parents and peers, right? People believe peers. Why should they believe me? You build something, so it's nice that you said it. If you don't know what to prioritize, if you don't know how to plan, you can raise all the money in the world. The problems will remain the same.
Yeah, we have plenty of examples where people have raised over $1 billion and they all crashed and burned. And again, if you think about building an enterprise, you know, first you do need that vision or that idea of what you want to accomplish. The second thing you need is the skills. And the third thing is basically execution. Execution not at an individual level, but at an organizational level. And all those three things needs to come together, right? You can have some of the brightest minds, and I have had my share. I have worked with geniuses, right? And very, very bright people, but that skill without a vision is like a boat with a lot of horsepower, but no rudder, right? And then, you have a lot of people who have big vision, right? A lot of VCs, for instance, are in that category. A lot of rudder, but no horsepower at all, right? In that case, the boat's going nowhere. You need both, right? And and of course, if it's a good weather, those are your exogenous variables, right? Your boat can go farther, but sometimes it's stormy and those outside your control, but having the horsepower and the rudder still takes you there. And in the end, you do need a captain who can make sense, right? Who can basically, that's your execution part. That's saying, we have the skills, we have the vision, now let's do the right thing. Let's build it the right way, right? So just the skill, just the direction, or just the execution. Without each other, it's an incomplete thing. And many cases, I mean, you are absolutely right about it. And again, one more ingredient that I'll talk about is courage. You might have the best boat, you might have the best circumstances, but you don't have the courage to go and into the sea, nothing's going to happen either. In fact, I was talking to one of my mentors, from a long time ago, and they mentioned that they are way more intelligent and skillful people than courageous one, right? And building a company, a business, for a lot of us, specifically coming from STEM background, you know, studying and working and building things in labs, stepping out is a courageous decision. So you do need, like, those are some ingredients. Again, yeah, as you can tell, I think about these things very, very deeply as well, and still trying to figure out what it takes.
Um, as this podcast is being called Building Deep Tech, especially in robotics and AI, I have a lot of founders here that have a PhD, right? So that means you need to spend at least a decade in academia. And the lab is something totally different than reality and industry. So, and going over that bridge, having the guts to do that is very rare because you've been trained to have a very different kind of mindset, right?
Yeah.
To finish the Indian episode, you were talking about pressure. The other question that I asked was incentive. So it's always obvious you would like to improve life, getting yourself more opportunities, but there are other ways of doing that. Why engineering? Why why did you do the things that you did?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it was all incentive. The pressure was there because of the competition.
Hmm.
For me, at least, incentive was there from day one. In fact, the courageous thing for me was to acknowledge that I want to do this, but unless I crack those exams, I'm not going to be able to do it. So, no other choice. So the pressure was circumstances. You know, when it comes to things like robotics specifically, right? And even, the other thing that I do is aviation, same thing there. And probably this applies to all the hard deep tech things. Unless you're crazy, between physics, between money, between competition, between dedication and time, things won't happen. So you really have to be crazy and incentivized to work in these fields, right? I have yet to come across a roboticist that does not think about robots in and out, right? So there is an inherent, I would say, incentive, and this is intrinsic For a lot of these guys and girls, actually, they are very, very motivated, right? If you were to go and make money, there are many ways to make money. There's no question about it, right? But
Easier ways.
specifically, yeah, easy ways. But robotics is hard, right? Robotics is hard. I see my team, you know, burning the midnight oil, just trying to make something work. That chess piece, I need to go and pick it up, right? Unless you are crazy, it's not happening, right? So incentive is big. It needs to be there.
So there was really a love for the topic.
Say it again.
So there was a real love for the
Oh, yeah,
topic.
yeah, yeah. Oh, there was a love for topic. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Um, as I said, right, I wanted to, you know, build computers, right? In fact, I mean, if you, my my journey is a little bit of intertwined, actually. Maybe, I'll share it with here so that, maybe it'll be useful for folks. There have been two loves in my life. One was aviation, and the second was computer science, right? Um, the earliest memory I have is me not wanting to get off an airplane. This is like I was 2 years old, right? And the next memory I have is in a science museum. So they in my life they have just intertwined like that. For the longest time, I thought I'm going to become an Air Force pilot, and I went through some of these motions processes like any country has. When it was, the one of the final interviews, I realized that my personality is it questions everything, right? So you question, like, a scientist. Why are you scientists? Because you question the status quo. You question, like, why is the wheel moves like this, or why the temperatures are changing, so forth, right? And quickly realize that that's not very amenable for a lifestyle in an armed forces. So basically, I said, all right, that's not happening, right? And that's not happening. What was the other thing that I wanted to do? Was really, become an engineer, specifically think about AI and computer science. And that meant that I had to go and cross this hurdle, which was this exam called joint entrance exam. During my day and age, 90,000 students every year took, and they would accept 1,000. Out of those 1,000, top 50 would get into computer science. So what are the chances of making that? I was a mediocre student. I never came first in my class. I used to barely, I'm in the middle of the pack, right? But that one year, I bust my butt, right? Ended up, getting through, and of course, again. So, to, answer your question, like your question about, I mean, in the end, right? I mean, there's a lot of incentive that goes in, right? And you sometimes, in order to do things that you like, you have to just take that courageous step. That courageous step for me was deciding to go and work really hard, right? So when it comes to entrepreneurship as well, right? I was at Microsoft Research for a long time, went through the golden age of Microsoft Research. Back in 2005, 2006, this was the place where everyone wanted to come and work for. I believe that the statistic was that 70% of computer science PhDs touched Microsoft Research as a lab, right? And I spent 17 years there, some of my most productive years. But it was very clear that the next step was to take these technologies out and have have them useful in the world, right? So natural extension to that was taking this bold step. All right, robotics is young and new. In order to make an impact, we want to be masters of our own destiny. So let's go and build this thing.
I mean, I had a few people on the podcast that had the same kind of situation. There
Yeah.
is love for something, and in order to achieve it, you need to go through hell. And it's if I mean, this is episode, I don't know which one it will be when I today I published episode 81. So it is very obvious that among those 81 published episodes, I can tell you that um, quite a bit of people said, oh, there were straight A students from the very
Yeah.
early beginning. But there
Oh,
were a lot
amazing.
of people like you that said, I was doing okay, I was going by, but then I saw something and I
Yeah.
wanted to have it. And I don't know from who that quote is, but if you have a why, then the how gets easy. And
Yeah.
not easy,
Yeah.
it's still
Not
hard.
easy, but you have to work for it, but at least it's a path here to tread, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
and it's good to see that this is coming over and over again because it shows people that you can avoid it as long as you like. But if you really would like to do it and if you would like to have it, you need to make it work. And then the brutal force comes, right? You do need to force it into reality.
Yeah. Yeah.
Otherwise, it will not become reality.
Yeah. In the end, like if the path is front of you, you are the one who has to walk it. No one is going to walk for you, right? Um, you know, I mean, as I said, like I have met hundreds of brilliant people, very bright folks. And the one thing that stood out from the ones that have, led and risen high in the organizations is perseverance, right? It's not that one burst, but persevering, it's the ability to keep going no matter what. And of course you need the horsepower, you need the ability to keep moving forward, but if you can keep persevering, I think you learn a lot. I don't know if it's a happy ending or not, but at least you learn a lot, and that itself is the reward, right?
Um, yeah, I'm very happy that you gave us such insight. And before we go over to, and I'm really curious to hear what you guys are doing
Yeah.
today, maybe we can finish this up with you telling me how was it coming from India at the age of, I think you said 20, and going to the US. I don't know how frequent you have been to the US or how much you've been in contact with Western culture, but I'm always curious to see how one person that is doing pretty good in one environment gets to another one, because this is something that is unique and it also again takes guts
Yeah.
to actually do it. How was that
Yeah.
for you?
Yeah, so here's the deal, right? When I came to this country, this was nothing like now. A lot of folks that came with me from my class, they never had been even on an airplane. Just to give you a sense, right? I had a little bit of a difference because I had scientist parents, and they made sure that I had enough exposure. But it was difficult. It was difficult again, culturally. It's one of my personalities as well, right? I mean, I take time to adjust to things, so that's a little bit personal. But again, a couple of things. MIT is so rich environment for someone who's intellectually curious, right? So you go right deep into it, and that's a blessing. That's a blessing because you don't have anything else to think about, right? And of course, you are being exposed to new ideas. But culturally, it took me a couple of years, to be honest, right, to be fully immersed and understand how things work. Um, the peer group that I relied so heavily in India, it was there, but here it was sparser, right? It was sparser. This was also the day and age that internet was starting to boom. So people had the option of having a laptop in their dorm rooms and never showing up at the labs, right? Before that, that was not an option. You had to be in your laboratory to work. So you can imagine how it used to be. It used to be everyone's there and just working and hanging out, and suddenly you come to a place. So again, there are aspects of the cultural aspects that are difficult. But again, I'm sharing because it took me a couple of years to get situated, right? To really understand the lay of the land, mentally get on par with what's expected and what are the cultural norms, right? In terms of science and math, thankfully, I had a solid foundation, so that was not a problem. But more importantly, I think the training that I got in the grad school was thinking about what and why more than how, right? All my training in India was about how, and what and why is what the graduate school gave me, right? And yeah, so I'm very privileged, very blessed to have made that journey, to be honest. So few people in the world get an opportunity like that, and yeah, so it's been great.
I mean, as you said, you earned your way. Maybe you have one or two advantages, but in the very end, as you said, even the path is there. You still need to go on your own. You still
Yeah,
need to do it. There's no way around it, right?
around it.
Um, thanks for giving that insight. I mean, this is one of the reasons why I have this podcast to get those kind of stories out of people.
Yeah.
But maybe we can now focusing on what you guys are doing today and how you're gonna do things today.
Yeah, absolutely. So, the history of the company is the following. So, I was at Microsoft Research running a very successful robotics group there, right? We were publishing quite a bit, um, you know, um, you know, getting quite a bit of attention, but it was very clear that the leap towards deployment of robots wouldn't happen if we were in the confines of research labs, right? So at that time, basically started General Robotics. Few of the folks from my team, were brave enough and joined. Right? You can imagine brave enough because you have the comfort of one of the top research labs, and you said, "All right, no, I'm going to, come and work with you." The the insight has been the following. Like I had been very active in machine learning and computer vision for since year 2000. In 2012, when the deep learning, the advances in deep learning started breaking through, right? AlexNet, and again, this is computer vision 2012, 2013. I proposed within Microsoft basically an effort to study deep machine learning in the context of robotics. Right? You can imagine, like, deep machine learning was nowhere in robotics at that time. This is 10, 12 years ago. We were having difficulty just doing computer vision. Now, robotics is a leap further. So, spent a decade really understanding what it takes to have deep machine learning systems for robots. We had ideas in simulation come out. We have ideas in, of course, reinforcement learning and pre-training. Some of the earliest work in those fields came out of that research group as well. You know, but again, come 2021, 2022, when LLM was LLMs, large language models, and people were thinking about for foundation model for X, and X being robotics in this case, came out. We realized that, all right, this is going to accelerate. But the biggest problem is not going to be the science, it's not going to be the models. For robotics, it's going to be deployment. Over the course of years, I have spoken with hundreds of these enterprises who want to do reinforcement learnings on robots, who want to do foundation models, who want to do fine tuning. They want to take their latest LLMs, be it Pi point 5 or GRU 10, whatever. But there are nearly zero deployments besides one or two PoCs they will do. There is a graveyard of robots in many of these organizations. These are UR5E arms, these are Boston Dynamics dogs, animal, now unitary, and now there will be a graveyard of humanoids as well. No one is getting to deployment. They will spend upwards of $20 million, many of these organizations, just to collect a bunch of toys, which are teleoperated robots, right? So, we started really thinking deeply about what would it take for folks to get to deployment. And there were two things that we realized. First is there is not enough expertise in the world right now. How many people can do deep learning and robotics well? That number is single digit thousands, I believe, if not less than 1,000, right? I mean, from my assessment of this field, I think for every 20 people who can do machine learning, maybe one can do robotics, right? So if that's the case, good luck getting to deployment. If your model is going to be, oh, look, here is our foundation model. Now you go and do RL or post training on top or do some kind of a fine tuning. Most of the organizations don't have the capability, right? So that's scarcity, labor, like, there's no horsepower to do this thing. And the second thing is, the the robotic software hardware infrastructure is so fragmented. It's akin to, the boat analogy I gave you. It's like boat has holes, right? So again, what does it mean? A lot of robotic engineering is happening as if we were in 90s and maybe 2000s, right? What were the two big learnings in the last decade? One was, of course, deep machine learning, and the second was cloud computing, right? But we are trying to build robots with everything on the edge as it was in 1990s, right? Deep learning, sure, some people might use it, but it's only being used mostly for perception. Sure, there are few research initiatives that try to do end-to-end learning, right? But all in all, there is a big infra gap. We still rely on ROS 2. ROS was invented 2004, 2005, 20 years ago before cloud computing. Don't we think that any architecturally things should change because of cloud and deep learning, right? So there are problems like those. So hence, we are bringing to the market this product called Grid, akin to how Grid distributes electricity for electrical appliances. This Grid is for AI skills for robot. And what Grid does, it basically solves these two problems. One is fragmented infrastructure, right? Can I enable you, if you have a UR5E arm, to do interesting things right now without you getting lost in this in this maze of Python dependencies and simulation and teleoperation and all those things? Can we get our customers to deployment right away? And again, akin to that electrical grid, this is a grid where you have AI skills and where robots simply connect to. And when they connect to this grid, your robot can see the world. They have these AI skills. So it gets around both the problem of fragmented infrastructure as well as scarcity of labor, right? So I guess, basically that's what we are doing. We are really trying to get to deployment as fast as possible. The folks on my team, they are some of the foremost roboticists. They build these skills. You probably saw that video of humanoid. These are skills being built using the most frontier technology, diffusion model, simulation, reinforcement learning. But these are then getting on grid so that it's accessible to whoever have those robot form factors. I want to reduce the time period between research and deployment to minutes, right? That's what grid does.
It's interesting, and I will send this episode over to a few people that I know. Also founders, also people working in robotics and AI, because it was kind of a bit of a rant of what people trying to sell. So foundation models, fine
Yeah.
tuning.
Yeah.
So it was it was direct, indirect kind of rant of what people are selling at the moment and raising money for. And I don't have the expertise to really capture everything that you say, and I'm not too deep into the technology to be able to judge it, right? So this is to others. This is the reason why
Absolutely.
this is the reason why this is not a technical podcast, but a people's podcast. But I mean, I've been in the business now for a bit, and it's the deployment part that I've been part of earlier on, without
Yeah.
being a technical guy here or being a commercial guy, being a people's person. But the deployment part is something I was in charge of a robotic AI vision company I was working for earlier. And why is that? Because because I mean, on a technical level, they are the problems that you're facing and that you just
Yeah.
were listing up. But the other part is And now we're coming back to the peer topic. There's so many. There's such a lack of knowledge. There is such a lack of being able to plan, to organize, to really understand that this is a piece of technology that will be embedded in an or like an improved system in an unimproved series, right? Because
Yeah.
we are now automating the things that were unable to be automated, right?
Correct.
All the parts that had been automated, serial production, they are fine. They are good, right? You tweak a little bit here and there and get maybe a little faster cycle time, whatever. But we're talking now about getting into the ugly parts where human labor is
I
still
know.
deployed, right? And now we're trying to deploy um, a new technology in a flawed system, and
Yeah,
people
yeah.
are not thinking about this. You were mentioning the arm, right? There was a cobot boom, I don't know,
Hmm.
10, 15 years ago, 10 years ago,
Yes.
15 years ago. Same thing, right? And it didn't work out. Why it didn't work out? Because people don't have the knowledge. People don't have the, as you said, the how
Yeah,
and
yeah,
the
yeah.
why and the so that people were unaware of this. So it's interesting that you
That's-
guys are focusing on the deployment part. And how and can you get a bit more concrete? How does it look like?
Yeah, so it's very straightforward. So imagine you have, one of those UR5E arms. I'll just give you an example. A lot of industries have those. Specifically, if you're in manufacturing, if you have any pick and place, likely your organization has invested in a UR5E arm, right? And that arm is what? That arm is a bunch of motors with a pipe and some firmware on it so that you can control it. You can ask it to move to a certain pose, certain velocity, and so forth, right? But that's about it. It does not have any eyes, so it has no sensing, it has no cameras, and neither does have any compute or any AI model that's basically providing any kind of intelligence. So in order to pick and place, imagine a application where you are just from a grocery basket taking things out and putting in the refrigerator. Just that simple example, right? In order to have this thing operate, first engineer, test, and operate, you probably are looking at several $1 million worth of investment if you can find right people, right? First you have to find the right people, an engineer who understands these things. At least it's a crew of 2 to 3 engineers who are thinking about it, and then between testing, simulation, data collection, it's few months worth of journey. But with grid, pick and place, generalized pick and place is a skill, right? And it has been, it can pick and place majority of the household objects, for instance, because it has been trained with foundation models and so forth. Again, not trying to get too technical, but if you have that UR5E arms, all you got to do is write an API call, right? Here is what I see, pick and place this thing, and you have it.
So the company I was working for, they started with cobots, but then later on were able to also being deployed on KUKA and Fanuc.
Yeah.
The question is, you said that they couldn't see, right? A lot of startups are going to that niche. There's a few people that are doing this, right? So you mount a camera at the flange at the end, and now the robot out of sudden can see, and you can train it. So how is that different from those systems?
Because it's plug and play. I mean, you don't even need a person. All you need is an API call from us. You can hire a person to mount that camera and do those things, but it's an API call, right? It's already served. It's there right now. If you have a UR5E arm, you can just make an API call right now. Of course, if you have, we support a couple of pretty standard cameras, but sure. I mean, yeah, there have been businesses, but that's been a consulting model, and it's not scalable, you know,
And
and not many people can afford it.
the so the business model back then, no, not the business model. I mean, it was trying to be a software company, but there's a robot involved. A lot of the
Yeah, exactly.
SMEs don't have a robot. So out of sight, and now you're in this situation where you become not a distributor necessarily, but you're talking to system integrators because the customer wants turnkey solutions, right? They don't want
Yeah.
to
Don't
install a
want to engineer
camera.
it.
They don't want to
Exactly.
to train
Exactly.
anything. So how is that with you guys? What do you guys
So
do?
we do a couple of things. We work with many different OEMs. There are 40 plus different kinds of robots on grid already, and these skills have been fine tuned for those robots out of the box, right? So there are multiple kinds of arms, quadrupeds, drones, mobile vehicles, right? All of those guys are already on the platform. So if you go and buy any of those robots, they are supported out of the box, right? And again, if you are an industry player, right, thinking about robotics, likely you are working with a service integrator already,
Mm.
right? And service integrators, they are good at integrating things, but they are not good at creating AI skills, right? And grid basically is a very important tool for all of those system integrators to have in their toolbox.
I mean, if you don't mind sharing, where are you guys are from a business, not from a company perspective? So how big is the team? Where are you guys located? Maybe you can share a little
Yeah,
bit
yeah,
about
absolutely.
this.
Yes, yes. It's so we are out of Seattle, so Redmond specifically in Washington. We are 20 plus folks. Out of them, 19 are robotics engineers. Right. Most of this is a roboticist play. I have a couple of people in the business team, and yes, we are selling to enterprises, large enterprises, and finding success in deployment. Right. Um, yeah, so fairly young, but very, um, full of horsepower as well as rudder. Let me put it that way.
The as I'm talking and working with early stage startups in robotics and AI, the first few customers partners are always very tricky to get them to see what kind of use cases are you actually capable of delivering. What are the first KPIs that you can agree on because you are sure that you can match them. Uh, you're much further than that, especially as you said that you are onboarded
Yeah.
a lot of robots and you're always talking to enterprise customers. How is that
Yes.
step from being very early stage but still being
Yeah.
able to serve that?
Yeah. So I would say that unfair advantage that we have is, my and some of the guys in my team's training on building enterprise businesses. We came from Microsoft. We know the anatomy of how to build an enterprise business inside out, like what it takes, how to structure those things, and how to even go and close them very rapidly. Building for enterprises is very different than building for end consumers, right? So those enterprise deals, are structured so that we can hit the points that you mentioned, like the right amount of KPIs, moving towards deployment and then expansion as we move forward, right? Currently, the two top use cases is, of course, pick and place, and the second one is locomotion. So between movement and manipulation, we can serve a very high number of customers. And again, humanoid is basically a culmination of combination of movement with locomotion.
What about dexterity?
Dexterity. So again, we do have research efforts in dexterity. Let me put it that way. Dexterity itself is a frontier area. With appropriate customer, we will go and we will, I would say, even explore the boundaries of it. But in terms of productionization, these are standard grippers that we go with, right? But again, as I said, the DNA of the team is R&D. So we are on top of the field, and as things becomes available, they'll start showing up on grid. The biggest thing that grid will do is it will insure you against technological advances otherwise that you might not have the bandwidth for. If you're on grid, you have the access to latest and greatest models and technology for robots.
It's it's very nice to have this kind of conversations because I there's two things, right? First, I always like people who are very much into their topic. So that means if I see something online I have the opportunity now to have access to you. You are so kind being on the podcast, so I can, as you said, being very edge on what's happening, like in general, but also the depth and the energy that you bring with it. That means being able to talk about your product, about the vision, and I'm curious to see what comes out of that. Are you guys aiming to raise
Yes, yes. I mean, as a founder, you're always raising, right?
in some
Specifically in the
sort?
robotics, right? More than raise, I think it's also partnerships.
Mm.
Specifically, my philosophy on raising is that you need to partner with us, right? This is a very important technology. It's going to change lives, and honestly, there is no way around it. We need to have robots if we were to sustain the lifestyle that we live right now, just because of all the labor shortages as well as some of the geopolitical headwinds. So, if it's such an important technology, I do not want you just to be a financier of it. I want you to participate very actively with us.
Because we see there's a hype cycle as that we are in. There's huge numbers being thrown around. People ask, where's the value? Where's the deployment? You were talking about deployment, right? And humanoids. How many humanoids have been deployed in the world at this moment?
Yeah. What's the crazy bit? We are seeing demand for humanoids related projects, huge demand, right? Neither the hardware vendors are ready, and of course, software is not there, right? And of course, grid is quite further along, right? If we partner with appropriate hardware manufacturers, a lot of these things can be delivered right now. But that's what it is. A lot of hype has been created, and again, very promising technology, right?
Mm.
But if you want to go and buy this technology somewhere, you have no hardware, neither you have the software right now.
It's nice to hear this kind of, like your little rant earlier on, insights from the world of robotics and AI, but being very transparent and very bland. I think I appreciate that part of your character very much because it makes my conversation much more interesting and gives the this kind of talks more facets,
Absolutely.
yeah, more kind of angles. I'm very happy that you said yes. Where what is the big next step? What should I look out for when I'm looking for General Robotics?
Now, so we are, as I said, we are a frontier R&D team.
Mm.
There will be some very exciting announcements in the sense of how we are designing the robotic ecosystem to be. It's a very contrarian bet. Everyone talks about edge. For instance, NVIDIA have these GPUs they want to have on every robots, but we are consolidating on the cloud. We are saying AI skills will be on the cloud. It's where your robot needs to talk to. Right? So a number of technological innovations in order to build, the story that I have been telling you, right? And you're going to see in the next few weeks a number of these technical announcements, as well as we do write research papers, so many of those details will show up in there. So, for instance, again, in the next week you'll see few architectural announcements. We actively onboard robots. So if there are robots that you are working with, or any of your listeners are working with, and they want AI skills for them, they should definitely let us know. We can onboard robots very rapidly. Like the DNA of the team is ingrained into simulations and modeling. And so any new robot can come onto Grid platform in a matter of hours, if not days, right? So, new robots will show up, new skills will show up. I'm quickly trying to get to a place where, for instance, the skills that we are showing on humanoids, people should be able to access them through API calls. So if you go and buy a G1 humanoid or agility or something like that, right, you should be able to get those skills on your robots right away. And so again, keep an eye on some of the technical announcements. But as we expand our repertoire of both robots and skills, I think we are going to make AI accessible for every robot, right? It does not need to be in these niche labs where you spend millions of dollars and spend months of R&D time. I mean, it should be as easy as accessing your email.
That is a statement. Thank you very much for your time, your insights, but also your personal learnings and struggles and challenges. This is what this podcast is all about, and I'm happy to see what's next for you guys.
Absolutely. Thank you, Eller. Thank you for having me.
Take care.
Okay, bye.
Bye bye.